Coug's house. All right. Houston wins 70-36. And I'm telling you, it never even felt that close.
You are Locked On Coogs, your daily podcast on the Houston Cougars, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome to Locked On Coogs, daily podcast all about your Houston Cougars. I'm your host, Houston-born teacher and coach, and I'm here to break down Houston's big win over Utah. But I think at some point, it's just fair to say that in a 70-36 win, you're just better. Today's show is brought to you, by Game Time, and we'll talk more about them later. But Houston, again, dominates Utah 70-36 in a game that I bluntly and admittedly was 100% wrong in my prediction on. I thought it was going to be a weird game, that it was setting up for a weird game. Not a loss, but a weird game. And so, for this one, I got a couple things I want to talk about, how we're reacting to the game a little bit. And kind of, I'm going to chuckle at different points in this one. It's kind of a, we'll say something funny. I don't know, it's just a funny game, to say the least. I'll also do some looking at, like, what do you actually take away from a game like this? And then bluntly and defiantly, we're going to look at some other things, including things like the Houston blue uniforms that they broke out at halftime and stuff like that. So pay attention as we go. Time in the chat. This is a live reaction post-game show. If you're listening on audio platforms after the fact, make sure you hit subscribe on YouTube and come in and let us know what you think. All right, so in reacting to this one, I got to be honest. I have to admit I was wrong. Now, I will say that I felt extra weird when in the pregame, Emanuel Sharp was walking around. I guess he walked around during the girls' game in a boot, it looks like. And so people were starting to tweet about it and talk about it, and officially was ruled out before the game. Sounds like he might have, had a little bit of an ankle thing in practice recently. I am tempted to think that we'd have heard more about this going into the game if it were worse. Honestly, he was like standing up and stuff on the sideline and on the bench. He was standing up in the post game. He's putting weight on it with the boot on as he's walking around. But I thought it was going to be a weird game. That was going to be a weird game because of the snow and the week and the preparation, the postponement. Utah was actually shooting the ball really well the last few games. Houston had kind of a stinker on the road over the weekend, and they won, but it was not like a great, well-played game. And, getting the Emanuel Sharp news forehand ended up making me kind of feel like I needed to compound that. And instead, Houston ends up winning again 70-36. A few things that I thought was interesting in this one that I was like, oh, that's what we're going to do about this, is that in the defense side of the basketball game, defensive side of the floor, Houston was smaller at just about every position. Utah's shortest starter was 6'6". Houston's tallest player is 6'8", right? Like, that's just the way that goes. And instead of trying to do excess things outside or try and match it by playing your biggest guys or whatever, Houston just flat switched everything. And it kind of feels simple and obvious after the fact, but Houston's switching defense in this added to their ball pressure and intensity because no screen away from the ball was going to work. So you couldn't screen to set up anyone for three if you're Utah, because everything was just going to get switched. There was no way to pull the man away from him, because your man was just going to hop in there. And as I look at that, it makes a ton of sense, and it's really obvious out of the fact. And again, that's why Sampson is the Sampson that he is. But what it meant was, hey, everyone is giving up several inches inside. Every one of our guys is tough enough to cover in the post. Every one of our guys can keep up with you on the perimeter because they're a little slow and stiff. So that's what we rolled with, right? And so Houston went with this switching, we would have called it 55 defense, 5-on switching all 5 spots. And they would blitz ball screens. And on the backside of things, they would just switch all the off-ball screens. And it really flustered Utah. Utah shot 30%, which I think was shocking, because they shot 14% from three. They were 5 of 17. I'm sorry. They were 5 of 17 from three, 29% from three. 1 of 7 was the second half. And I look at what Utah wants to do. They're a team that shoots the majority of their makes are from the outside the 3-point line. They shoot a lot of threes. They get a lot of points up. They're using their length to their advantage, and none of that mattered. It was all negated by the switching defense that that Houston ran. It also was interesting to see like Houston was able to fluster Gabe Madsen. You remember Gabe Madsen from a year ago when these two teams played in Charleston. He had 29 points. It seemed like it didn't matter what you did to him. He was going to make every three. In this one, he was 2 of 8 from behind the arc and had just 1 assist. He was very, very frustrated in this game. Guy I was worried about was Asar, the transfer in from East Carolina, kind of a coveted transfer from the transfer portal. He had just 1 point. Keanu Dawes, who came in and had a couple points off the bench, Houston area kid, thought he might do something. He had just 7. This is a dominant performance on the defensive side of the floor. And what's crazy is they finished with 36 and actually had a better second half, I think, than they could have. This game didn't have to be that close. The second half was only 29-19 in this basketball game. Houston let their foot off the gas, played young guys and reserves, and let them get the playing experience. But man, oh man, that defense was just flat suffocating. Now, I don't mean to dismiss the offense. I think Houston gets a bad rap on offense nationally, if I'm being really honest, because the defense is so incredible, so suffocating, and bluntly just so like it like sticks out watching college basketball because not everyone can play the kind of defense Houston does. It's just a different speed than teams are used to. They know every play that the other team's going to run. They understand every rotation they're supposed to make, and they work in sync really, really well together. But their offense is also very good, and I think it just gets kind of thrown to the side here because the defense is world class, right? But on offense, they had 4 guys at double figures, and that was 4 guys that could have all had a lot more, but they didn't have to play a whole lot in the second half. LJ Cryer had 13 points on 7 shots. Milos Uzan had 14 points to lead the team on 9 shots. Jawan Roberts had 11 points as well. And Terrence Arsenault, who got the start with Emanuel Sharp out, got his 10 points. Of those guys, I guess Terrence probably played the most minutes as things go. But that was really more a function of at the end of the game, you needed healthy bodies out there with them. Right, it wasn't like they had Emanuel and rotating guys through. Emanuel would have started, and Terrence wouldn't have had as many minutes, but you couldn't. And he really, and I just got a tweet saying something. Craig Smith, the Utah coach, said, so I want to talk about that in a second too. Terrence is really versatile in this game. Had some early blocks as well that were pretty important across the board. And let's make sure I got this number right. He had 4 blocks, 3 in the first half. And then Houston ended up finishing with 19 steals. I would contest that some of those steals maybe should have counted as blocks. If you lump them together and call them stocks, steals and blocks, Terrence had 7 of those. JoJo Tugler had 6. Jawan Roberts had 5. That combination stat, if you want to make that, Malik Wilson had all 5 steals, I guess, or had 5, and all 5 of his were steals. Houston dominated the takeaways in this game. What's funny is they dominated the turnover battle and made so many steals and forced them into so many errors that you almost kind of forget that, truthfully, Houston in the rebounding battle was like kind of even. Now, I say that to say that even in the terms of like the whole game, whenever it was a crucial rebound, Houston seemed to get it. But they actually lost the whole game's rebounding battle 33-36. Part of that's because Houston didn't get as many offensive rebounds. They shot the ball very well for most of this game. Part of that was honestly that they'd maybe give up a rebound but get the steal. There's no rebound off of a steal, right? Like, so statistics can be a little thrown off in that way, but I was surprised to see that number for sure. And they just beat up on an inferior basketball team. Now, Utah is going to win other Big 12 games. They're 3-3 going into this game in the conference, and I bet they win a few more. They might win before the week's over, honestly. And so when I look at them, like, this really says a lot more about Houston to me And I looked at it trying to watch in the last however long, but like, well, what does this mean about Houston going forward? What is the significance of this game, and where can Houston take what they did to Utah moving forward? Because this game was over very early. It was 18-5, and then it was 23-5, and then it was 27-8. But what can they take from a blowout win moving forward? Because they've got some coming up over the weekend that feel a little more challenging. And before we get to that, I do want to remind you that today's show is brought to you by our buddies over at Talkspace, because therapy is a game changer. It can help manage stress, improve sleep, and communicate more effectively. But finding the right therapist and fitting sessions into a busy schedule can be a challenge. That's where Talkspace comes in. Talkspace is the leading virtual therapy provider, makes getting the help you need easy, accessible, and affordable. With Talkspace, signing up is simple. You can match it with a licensed therapist who fits your needs, usually within 48 hours, and it's convenient. You can have time for sessions in the comfort of your own home and even message your therapist between appointments. And trust me, that's an important piece of this. Plus, Talkspace is covered by most insurance plans, and for most insured members, there's a $0 copay. It's never been easier to prioritize your mental health. As a listener to this podcast, you can get $80 off your first month with Talkspace when you go to Talkspace.com/lockedoncollege and enter the promo code SPACE80. To match with a licensed therapist today, go to Talkspace.com/lockedoncollege and enter promo code SPACE80 to get $80 off your first month and show your support for the show. That's Talkspace.com/lockedoncollege, promo code SPACE80. Park Ranger Locked On Coogs here, talking about Houston's big win over Utah. Now, I have some people in the chat here saying things along the lines of just like football, and it is nice to be able to say that, if I'm being really honest. Where'd it go right there? It was 2-0 basketball and football. We're going to keep that thing rolling. TI 7791 adds that there was no drop off, which is clear. Impressed him how much everyone played in sync. I obviously agree with that. I think they played really, really well. We call that playing on a rope when I've been coaching, right? Like you're all connected with a rope or something. The rotations, that is. The defense assignments were, and offensively, the ball did not stagnate for the most part. I like that a lot. The ball did stick a little bit with the second group. The young guys came in, but that's where we're at. As far as what happened to Sharp here, I got a comment. We mentioned it at the top of the show. That sounds like it was rolled ankle in practice. We're getting more information obviously as we get closer, but I would imagine that they might have had some idea of what was about to happen. It was precautionary. We shall see. And Kansas is next, as so many people are pointing out. And for what it's worth, I don't want to get too far ahead of ourselves here, but Kansas is kind of in their own rock fight in a close win in Fort Worth, again, or a close game in Fort Worth against TCU. As we're recording this right this moment, it's a 6-point game. I don't know if that one will finish while we record, but I just want to keep an eye on Kansas. Is a whole lot different team at home. Houston's got to go there this weekend, but it would be kind of nice to watch someone beat up on them before Houston had their turn. All right, so I said that this segment was going to be about what Houston can pull for games like that Kansas game, what Houston can pull out of a big, honestly, blowout team that shouldn't be in the same league. And frankly, jokes on Utah because they talk about not wanting to be in the same league. And like, what do you pull out of that game as a staff, as a team, as a program? Because you can't not get better today. You got Kansas this weekend. Again, Kansas maybe is not the same team they've been before. Maybe you feel like you have more talent. Winning at Kansas is hard. Winning at West Virginia next week will be hard. That's a hard place to play. Texas Tech has upset some people already this year. McCaslin's kind of got it rolling. They're scoring a lot of points up there in Lubbock. And you've also got Baylor coming to your place early in February. And so that's a lot of games for the next couple of weeks that you need to be ready for, right? And so what you're going to take out of this one, I think, first of all, is the minute distribution was in your favor. And by that, I mean that like it wasn't like everyone had to, you had to play your starters for 38 minutes to have a chance in this one. Pretty evenly distributed. Arsenal played 33 minutes, which I will argue in a second is a good thing, but that was the most by kind of a lot. The next highest was Uzan played 25, Roberts played 25. I mentioned Arsenal played 33, most for any starter, but he also isn't typically a starter, so he had to get some of the same rotational minutes at the end of the bench when those guys were in the game later. And for what it's worth, I don't know that I would have done it, full disclosure, but Sampson is Sampson and I am I. But I do think that it is worth pointing out that that significantly passed what his minutes restriction unofficially was to start the season, right? Terrence was on the floor a lot and made an impact on all of it. And so I'd say one thing to take away from this is that Terrence can play 30 minutes. I would say that your guys are otherwise healthy, assuming that Emanuel's ankle is not the kind of thing that's super serious. You're getting out of this game with the same health you came into it with. You also found out that, he didn't, I don't want to say like they shot poorly. As a team, they did shoot just 27.8% from the three-point line. Admittedly, that's mostly because the bench did not make a three. And the starters themselves, Uzan was 2 of 4, Cryer was 3 of 4, Arsenal was just 0 of 3, right? But even with that right there is 5 of 11. You take at Arsenal, that's Uzan and Cryer are both 5 of 8. That's pretty strong. I thought you had a particularly efficient night out of Javier Francis as well. 17 minutes, 6 points, couple rebounds. I thought he was a force inside. I was surprised he just had one block. I feel like he had at least a handful of shots that they shot over his hand and missed because of the deal there. What I really liked about when Houston used their big guys in this one, Tugler, Roberts, and Francis, when Utah went zone, Houston was able to throw those guys in the mid post and kind of let them work. It was a really good game for Roberts and Francis in that way. And I feel like that's going to take away from this as well. There are going to be moments against Kansas, moments against Baylor, moments against Tech, where you're going to have to kind of throw the ball in there and let them take advantage of something to kind of make sure that the opponent is covering everything, right? You can't rely on just the sharpshooting of Cryer and Sharp, no pun intended, forever, right? And so having those as options is really, really important. I also think you understood that the switching defense you can play. Obviously, it's not the most talented sides at Utah, but a lot of your smaller guys were able to work in the post, work out in the post, and play with bigger players. Now, Hunter Dickinson is kind of a roller coaster at Kansas, and when we talk to Derek Johnson later this week, I'm sure he'll elaborate some, but he's had a weird career there, a weird part of his career there. He played really well in the first game Houston played against them last year. Hunter Dickinson did. And I think you feel like you can run a few different looks at him now after seeing your guys switch and play the switching game so well. Again, no one at Utah is as good as Hunter Dickinson is, but you feel better about what you get if you get guards on that kind of stuff in this game. I thought you saw a couple different times it looked like Malik Wilson can fly. And that's always a good thing to take away. I thought in watching the young guys, and actually I want to ask this to the live audience because this is a live reaction show on YouTube. If you want to be on the next one, make sure you hit subscribe to the bell so you know we're live. We're live after games. I would ask, of those young guys, Mercy Miller, Cordell Jefferson, Sedlot, who stuck out as like that guy's close to being ready? I think to up until today, most people said Mercy was the most so. I still think he's really close. I kind of felt like Sed looked every bit able to handle a lot of what his role would be with the older guys. Sed had just a point, but he did have 5 rebounds and 2 blocks. Pretty big enforcer, very literally big on the inside. I think part of the reason there is also Sed's just like physically built already. He's so well built already. He's able to play with a tenacity and physicality that other guys have to get ready to play with. Obviously, Cordell came in. I thought he had a good couple looks. Neither one fell, but I thought he did a good job while he was in there. Mercy, again, we've all thought is like ready offensively and getting super close defensively. I didn't see any moment in this one where there's like an obvious rotation miss, something like that. And for Mercy, that's a big step up from where he was when he came into the season. He was missing rotations against cupcake teams at the start of the season, I thought. And that's just changing high-end high school basketball to high-end Division I basketball, right? But played really, really well, I thought, as well. I just feel like Sed's physical tools, if you needed one of those 3 to come in a close game in Lawrence this weekend or against Baylor in a few weeks, or you just, hey, I need 3 minutes. I felt like Said gave them more translatable things to what he'll be able to do. Now, obviously, very different position. The power forward center position is a spot that's easy on paper, hard on hardwood. It's hard to do physically, right? So we'll see. But I felt pretty encouraged by what Said did in that basketball game. Said a lot. Is also a monstrous man, and I don't want to offend him or ruffle his feathers. Now, I will say some of the biggest things came out of this game might have actually been a halftime announcement of some blue uniforms heading Houston's way, which I want to talk about in 1 second as we get further into our live post-game reaction here of Locked On Coogs. But before we get too far, I did mention that today's show was brought to you by Game Time. And as you know, I don't know if you're going to get a chance to attend an NFL playoff game, if you got to go to one when the Texans were in town or anything like that. But it's an experience unlike any other. The energy, the excitement, the connection with the fans are all unmatched. It's like an all-stakes kind of thing. I remember the thrill of seeing the Texans win a playoff game, like early on. The Texans, it's a big deal, right? And it's a big deal to be there in person. And if I were going to get tickets, go in person, I'd be going to Game Time. This year, Game Time makes it even easier to create those unforgettable moments with their new feature, Game Time Picks. It filters out the fluff and shows you own the best deals on great seats so you can focus on what matters, being there. I use Game Time Picks to grab tickets from my brother for a holiday gift. I thought it was a great idea to give him experience, and I went on and found great tickets, great seats. Got to see what the view was going to be like from those seats, and the price was all in. Everything was there. There was no surprises in that pricing. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets like I did with Game Time, and download the Game Time app today. Create an account, use code Locked On College. That's $20 off your first purchase with code Locked On College. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code Locked On College. LOCKEDONCOLLEGE for $20 off. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest prices guaranteed. What time is it? It's Game Time. Parker Angels, the Locked On Coogs here, trying to break down and pull out what we can from Houston's beatdown of Utah, 70-36. And Houston really kind of ran away this one early. Felt like a snooze fest in the second half for parts of it. Houston put the backups in for large stretches of that second half. But there was an exciting moment at halftime before we get to talking about what comes next for Houston with Kansas and future schedules and things like that, because we got more to talk about with all that as well. The big halftime announcement in this one was that Houston will be donning these blue uniforms later. I guess I would say later this month, but really the start of the next month on February 1st against Texas Tech at home. That game is like an earlier tip. It's like a 5 o'clock tip in the Fertitta Center. Houston's going to come out in these Houston blue uniforms. Kind of a take on the same way that the football team did against Baylor. It sounds like they're going to be wearing Houston blue like a game a year against an in-state rival kind of thing. Texas Tech being a Saturday game, I think makes that much more appealing in that sense. Baylor is afterwards too. I think they kind of wanted to make sure they got it in sooner rather than later. It's a merch kind of thing, I'm sure, want to kind of maximize that deal. I will say that I know that the guys in the program are a little superstitious. That's why, like, if they won in black with Houston on their chest, they're going to wear black with Houston on their chest until they don't while they're on the road. If they win with Cougars on their chest at home, they're going to wear white with Cougars on their chest until they don't win at home. Sampson's the same way about his polos. If they beat Texas Tech in blue, I bet there will be a push, and not that they have any say in it, but I bet there would be a push to wear it again after that. That all being said, uniforms themselves, we've done Houston blue stuff before. You can go check out the catalog, but it ties back to well before. I mean, the Oilers wore blue for Houston, right? Not the other way around. It's a Houston color. It's the Houston flag. It's the Houston police cars from back in the day. It's a Houston thing. It's really, really cool to see them in it. I'm excited to see them in it as well. And honestly, I'm excited to see the kicks there. If you're on YouTube, you see the kicks on the screen. The three guys in the picture, Emanuel Sharp, Juwan Roberts, and Milos Uzan, are all wearing Legend 11 blues, kind of a very collectible kind of Jordan 11. It's mostly white, and it's got a little light blue Jumpman. That's not the biggest news of the future. Obviously, for Houston, the big news of the future is Kansas this weekend. Kansas kind of extended a lead. They're up double digits now over TCU in Fort Worth. Obviously, we're not going to quite get to the end of that one before this episode is over. There are 4 minutes left in the game, though. They're up 10. They should win. And so Kansas is going to be going back home 14-4. Houston will be, I believe it's 15-3. Like right there. I'm right there. I think I'm right there. I think I'm right there. And, these are two of the top 3 teams in the conference. And you mix in Iowa State. I think Iowa State's better than Kansas for what it's worth. But the biggest deal about going to Kansas this weekend is that we understand after watching it last year, Kansas is a really, really challenging place to play. It almost doesn't matter how good or bad teams are. Kansas has lost a game at home. I believe it was earlier this year. I'm pulling up to double check that I'm right there. But, and I think that, yeah, they did. They lost to West Virginia. There you go. Boom. I think that honestly, there's kind of starting to be some like weaknesses in the armor, some holes in the wall, some stuff starting to fall apart there as far as the like lore of it all. But I also think that, honestly, as the conference has gotten bigger, they trimmed some fat in a basketball sense and added a program like Houston. I don't know that everyone else in America would see Kansas as a program that's kind of on the back end of something or kind of fallen off from when they were a few years ago or whatever, because truthfully, not every program is Houston. Right now, I'm not saying it's not going to go up there and be a dogfight. I think it is, but I'm not like scared of it like I think other programs might be. I think that that's kind of the next step, and consistently beating Kansas is kind of that next step in the like blue blood line and lineage here. We'll be breaking that down this week. So this is Thursday. I'll talk to Derek some about getting something out to record as a crossover so he can tell us a bit more about Kansas. I've been texting him some this week, but I was actually kind of focused on this Utah game. So we'll see what Derek says about the Jayhawks. If you remember last year when we played Kansas, I've got personal connections, big fan of KJ Adams. And so that's always hard to root against him in these 2 games a year. You got to do what you got to do. I love you, KJ. I hope you get a double-double and Houston wins by 35. That's what I hope happens. That's what I hope happens. Actually, I know more guys on that team this year than I did before, too. But anyway, it's all Cougs all the time. I'm not saying I want anything else to happen. I just think it's always interesting to watch that play out. Again, if my guys could score, but Houston still wins by like 30, that'd be fan-freaking-tastic. And frankly, for what it's worth, Houston is searching for that quad 1 win. The same curse that's happened twice now. They beat West Virginia at home so badly that West Virginia fell from 30th in the net to 32nd, and thus was no longer a quad 1 win, which is beating teams 1 through 30 at home. They over the weekend they beat UCF so bad that UCF fell from 70th to 73rd in the net, winning on the road in the top 70 is a quad 1 win. So both those games have become quad 2s because it is flexible. Now, that is not to say that they can't move back in. The only thing that would matter would be where those teams finish at the end of the season in the net. It's just a fun thing to track. And frankly, for what it's worth, it's interesting to see how Houston beats up on people and watches them become lesser than in the eyes of others. Just another way to fly under the radar. Houston's 15-3 record, those 3 losses continue to look better and better as we go on, by the way. Clearly a team that was gelling early in the season played a couple teams that are in the top part of the conversation here. And honestly, Houston was like, hovering around 500 when those 3 losses happened, and they've gotten all the way to 15-3, and other teams keep stacking L's. So we're talking about Houston and Kansas and getting ready for that game this weekend. If things pop off in football, if we get any big news there, obviously break down those kinds of things as well here at Locked On Coogs. So do me a favor, hit subscribe and hit the bell so you know we're live for the latest on the Houston Cougars each and every day. And if you're looking for a second listen, you're in the basketball kind of mood, Andy Isaac do a great job at Locked On College Basketball each day. I've started to, try and persuade them to talk about the Cougs and Iowa State more. So we'll see how those kinds of things go. Go check them out as well. Locked On Coogs is a primary of the Locked On Podcast Network. That means your team every day, especially when they win 70-36 over someone like Utah. Go Cougs.